Hello, and welcome everybody. Welcome to our third LinkedIn live session for 2024. We're so sorry, we've experienced a couple of troubles, the usual technical hiccups, nothing urgent, but we hope that Marjolein is going to be able to join us in a couple of minutes. Nevertheless, we are starting. It's a special day. It only happens every 4 years. It's the 29th of February, so we get to celebrate. But it's not only that, we also have amazing speakers and an amazing topic talking about the sandbox of European Union. So we're about to start and bring you some more information on what this actually is, how it happens, what the application period looks like, how it is to kind of contribute or to be part of the cohort, and see how the EU is inviting companies, the nonprofit organizations, and public entities from the EU and EEA to apply to this wonderful opportunity. For those of you unaware, the European Blockchain Regulatory Sandbox for Innovative Use Cases involving distributed ledger technologies, or the DLT as we call it, is an initiative of the European Commission. So the sandbox really establishes a pan-European framework for regulatory dialogues to increase the legal certainty primarily for the innovative blockchain technology solution. It was set up and is being operated to facilitate the dialogue between both the regulators on one side and the innovators for private and public sectors use cases on the other side. Legal advice and regulatory guidance will be provided in a safe and confidential environment. This is the main point of the sandbox, basically. And the dialogues will be held across the industry sectors and across the different geographical regions, which will help to identify and communicate best practices in the interest of the world wider EU and EEA blockchain community. The sandbox is again open to use cases based on any blockchain infrastructure. So Europe is really striving to become or be as agnostic as possible when it comes to that. So the first cohort of participants was announced on the 6th of September 2023, and I'm really pleased that we have speakers that have participated in that cohort. The deadline for applying, if you would like to become part of the second cohort, is March the 25th. So you still have some time, and if you're curious about how and why you should apply, please join this LinkedIn Live. You can also see the recording and ask the questions to the speakers, or just message us, the EUCI, if you have any questions with regard to that. So today we have gathered amazing speakers once again to learn and share more about the initiative and the benefits of participating. As previously said, we're going to be joined with Marjolein Geus, who is a partner at Bird & Bird's Dutch offices. She's specializing in European and international regulatory projects. And she's also a project leader of the European Blockchain Sandbox. So we're going to wait for her, and as soon as she can join us, we're going to welcome her in a dialogue as well. Next, we have Fabio Severino. You have a long-standing passion for technology and innovation and have founded your first startup during already the university years. That's quite incredible. You've also started working in the blockchain field in 2016, so early on the ICO era, gaining a proven track record in leading projects and software companies nationally and internationally. Today, you're leading Traent, a research and development group, designing new blockchain-based architectures and creating patents in scientific articles, and providing strategic directions for the company's product. Thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to hear everything from you about the first cohort. The second speaker also joining us that has participated in the first cohort is Meinke. You are the co-founder of deltaDAO AG. I would love to hear more about the deltaDAO itself, and the lead of the GaiaX open source software community. Together with these enterprises and public institutions across Europe, you and the deltaDAO team are contributing to a federated and sustainable data infrastructure where deltaDAO has been responsible for creating this first pan-European GaiaX digital service ecosystem. This, if I'm not mistaken, is powered by all these smart contracts and the DLT named Pontus, which we can see the logo on, since 2021. So noting that you have experience with the EU decision makers, it's also great to have you here so we can get some insights into the practicalities.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Right. So how we normally start these conversations is really with the basic questions before we even go into the main content. What brought you into this segment? What brought you into the blockchain infrastructure or industry overall? How you're enjoying it, and whether you, of course, have any regulatory issues and challenges. We can start with Fabio. Let's go.
Okay, so I started with blockchain 2011, so quite early, because a colleague of mine said, "Oh, you need to look at this thing. It's called Bitcoin. It's revolutionary." And we experimented, and then I forgot about Bitcoin for some years. Then 2016, I started working in a company in Zug, the so-called Crypto Valley in Switzerland. And basically, from that moment, I never stopped working on blockchain project. But I think that the project that I'm more happy is Traent, because it's the most ambitious. And so it's the most ambitious because we developed the project with 30 developers, and as a CTO, I had the opportunity to have a look at each and every pieces of the software. So started with Bitcoin and continuing with Traent, and so far has been a little bumpy with the regulation, but ultimately I think that it's very exciting nowadays, because all these new regulations, they are not only constraints, but I see them as opportunity. So I think it's cool.
Wow, really a pleasure to have an OG on the call since 2011. That's quite a year, actually, even though, you know, Bitcoin has been early starters then. Thank you so much for joining, Marjolein. It's really a pleasure to have you as well. To kind of bring you on board, I'll give you the floor to sort of introduce yourself. We had a first question posed to the speakers, and that is what brought you into this industry and how you see, for example, the regulatory challenges. So I'll give it to you to introduce yourself first, and then take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Even though I'm late, I apologize to everyone. But we had to go through some firewalls. But here we are. Well, how did I get here? Actually, I'm a lawyer, of course, so with specific legal and regulatory expertise. But I have always been a lawyer in the technology areas. So already from the very start, it was about law in connection with technology. And as technology developed, also the regulation developed. And then at the crossroad of technology and regulation, of course, you come across crypto assets. And that is, I think, what all brings us here together in combination with DLT. So thank you very much. Absolutely. Yeah, and I don't know, I can, of course, explain a bit more. The reason why I'm here is I'm the project leader for the European Blockchain Sandbox. And that is an initiative of the European Commission for which Bird & Bird has been engaged. So we are setting up and operating the European Blockchain Sandbox. It's a 3-year project, but I think you already introduced briefly the project, Anja.
Very, very briefly, we'll definitely get back to that. I'll give the word to Kai as well, just to kind of tell us a bit more about what brought you into this space and how it's been so far for you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So Touchpoint, yes, Bitcoin, as Fabio mentioned. A little bit later, but I very much can relate to your journey. I had a first Touchpoint, then forgot about it. But I stuck to it because I have a background in economics and IT, and those are really the basic principles, math, technology, economics that are stitched together here, right? I have been working in economics, mostly on solving tricky economic problems, and in IT, yeah, centralized databases, analytics on data. And it always boils down to 2 problems, and that got me into DLT technology in the end, right? That is control and collaboration and trust at scale. And once you realize this is a gigantic trust engine that can be a neutral ground for competitors to work together, then it makes click, right? And this is why it works, and this is why it scales, and that is what got me finally into this. So happy to build on this, and yeah, as a startup since 2021, the journey began a bit earlier, but we had to find the right concept to scale this, and we have been dedicating this to B2B only. And as you touched on challenges, Regulation is often perceived as a challenge, but all about this is about trust. And so I see the large opportunity here, because once properly regulated in a clear framework, this is the true enabler for scaling, for adoption, and to create trust. And in not so nice words, but I use them sometimes, be compliant or die. And you learn this the one or the other way. And I prefer the way that is successful and scaling. So we are here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for bringing us closer to actually the second question. So my team has forwarded an anecdote to me. And if we really start with the basics, there was a colleague of Marjolein, I think, that posted this anecdote about the European Blockchain Sandbox, which goes a bit like a blockchain innovator and an EU regulatory authority walk into a bar. What sounded like the beginning of a niche crypto joke a few years ago is now a reality thanks to the European Blockchain Sandbox. It's been a wonderful experience bringing to life this ambitious project to bridge the two worlds of regulation and blockchain technology. Now, this already sounds great, coupled with what we just heard from Kai. This is all amazing. I mean, it's really about building the dialogue. I do believe, however, that there is much more to it. So to really start with the basics, Marjolein, maybe you can tell us a bit more, since you're the lead project here. What is it all about? How does it actually look like to have this sandbox?
Yeah. No, thank you very much for the question. So the background of the sandbox was actually that the European Commission, but also the wider community, actually experienced more and more the need to understand better from actually two perspectives. From the perspective of the innovators, there was a need to understand better relevant regulations and laws. How to comply, also how to benefit from those, to follow up on Kai's comment just a minute ago. Also from the regulators and the authorities, there is a need to understand better new technologies, how DLT works, and then look at DLT use cases from the perspective of the relevant regulations and laws, both existing laws and regulations that need to be applied to new technologies, and also new laws and regulations that also needs to be applied. And there is really a need to enter into a dialogue between the two groups, because if you don't organize a dialogue, the regulators and the authorities will not understand what the new use cases are about and how to apply the regulations and laws where they are competent. And on the other hand, the innovators, they need to understand what is applicable, and they need guidance actually in how to apply. Not easy for both groups to find each other. Where do you start as an innovator? Who are you going to address? Where to find which country, which area, which regulator? And what are you going to talk about? And also, of course, the regulators and the authorities, they are not going to advertise, say, well, can you please come and talk to us? Because they also don't know who to send the invite to. So that is one element. One short additional comment, it's dialogues between the use case owner and relevant regulators and authorities, but also the best practices, the recommendations that are coming out of those dialogues, they will be included in the best practices report, which will then be made available to the wider community. It will be published by the European Commission.
That's amazing. Yeah, you mentioned people have questions. Who do you even approach? Where do you even find the relevant information, right? And this is really bringing me back to Kai and Fabio. You've both participated in the first cohort, and I really want to understand, how did you even get the information in the first place that this sandbox exists? And then what made you to make that decision that you're going to apply to it? What contributed to that?
So since my experience in blockchain field, I've been closely following all the activities of EBSI. Okay, so, but to be honest, I didn't know anything about the blockchain sandbox until I talked to Stefano Fabi from Bird and Bear that I met in InsurTech conference in London. And after a brief talk about what we do as Traent, what Bird and Bear is doing, he had this intuition that we could participate in this sandbox and to learn about all the learn from the regulators and from all the other participants, and in some ways also contribute with what we do. So for us is a very important opportunity because we get to learn from other companies like deltaDAO or regulators. And so it was really not going to a bar, but going to a conference, meeting a person. And then from that moment, we learn from the website, and we decided to participate on our own. But it was like a kind of random.
Yeah, it was a bit different for me. So we had a lot of previous connections to DG Connect, activities of the European Commission. And if you work in anything DLT or open identity related, self-sovereign identity, you know EPSI and you know what's happening there and what's happening, and you monitor that, right? Because it's being done for the sake of Europe and being more sovereign and independent, and to improve the level of digitalization. And at some point in time, we found the call and said, yeah, absolutely, we are going forward to that, and we are going to get an endorsement letter by GaiaX, because this is a pan-European initiative, and this is exactly what is happening here in the sandbox. And you mentioned a few words about guidance and availability before, and that's crucial. It's not like you call the regulator and say, I got a few questions, could you please answer them? I will go detailed. It doesn't work that way, right? So the avenues for constructive dialogue have to be carefully prepared. It's not that you get a straightforward answer by just calling somebody or writing an email. This process takes time, and it's precious. And why is it precious? Because we have a lot of worlds here. We have the enterprise world, the Web3 world, we got the regulatory world, law. They speak different languages, but we need to communicate more to come together. And once we've seen this, we immediately know we are going there. It's an incredible opportunity. Because there's no shortcut to it. You can do it the one way or the other way, but the dialogue must happen before you can really scale and to create trust. So yeah, so we applied, and we have been very fortunate to be selected for a good use case, we think, and for an important topic for Europe.
I do wonder how long it took, like the whole application, because you did mention it was a process, right? Also the dialogue itself. And just for the sake of the audience knowledge, because I'm not sure if everybody knows about your companies and the products and services that you offer, maybe you guys can give a bit of an insight into what's behind the stage, how your projects or companies operate, and what is it exactly that you're building?
Okay, so very simply, Traent is an ecosystem for transparent and sustainable enterprise to have a way to interact in a simple yet transparent way. So in other words, is an ecosystem where at the center there is an application which is called Era, which is a collaboration platform. So very similar to, let's say, Microsoft Teams or Google Workspace. You have a place where you can have collaboration with other companies, but in a way that is transparent. And this helps carrying out process like ESG reporting. So you can have you can add the transparency to ESG reporting, having immutable data. If you want to share this data with third party, let's say auditor or citizen, but in order to make it possible for like regular people, not developers, you need to really have a very simple user experience. So what we do is really we focus on having the easiest, straightforward the user experience for the end user. The problem was that when we started, there was no blockchain technology that allow you to exchange data in real time or having a data-intensive application. I cannot send you a video through Bitcoin, okay? So we needed to create a novel architecture, a novel solution, which is an hybrid blockchain that in simple terms, because it's very, very simple, it's like you take a public blockchain, one or more public blockchain, and one or more private blockchain, you put it together to have basically public auditability of the data you share, so confidential data. So you have all the freedom of having confidential information, exchange information in real time, but you have, let's say, decentralized proof of authenticity and integrity of the data. And this helps a lot when you are carrying out ESG processes. So our use case is all about ESG process and how it's connected to product passports, which are connected to the European Green Deal. So what we aim to do, what we are already doing is having this platform where you can collect data about the ESG data of your company and ESG data about your product and create this product passport that combines everything. More recently, and we started also using the capability of the system to improve process regarding data collection and training of AI algorithm, like deltaDAO does. So, and so basically, we, as Kai mentioned, blockchain is a beautiful technology to increase trust and let people verify the data, something that is very needed in our world.
Yeah, I can see how this is applicable or eligible for the sandbox already. What about deltaDAO?
Yeah, what we've been building, summarized under the term Pontus X, is a digital service ecosystem that allows all participants to monetize or share data, software, infrastructure, digital services, and to orchestrate them towards consumption-ready products. Meaning, in a picture, if I have a bunch of raw data, that's basically worthless. But what is something of worth is if that data is properly organized, annotated, computed, using the right software to derive real information from that, which I need. And this process is today not as efficient as it could be, especially if corporations work together in institutions. We know how that works, from facsimile to email to paper. It's not really streamlined. It can be much more efficient, and I think that's the great driver forward. So this orchestration is enabled in Pontus X between all the different entities. But the point is, where we are different than others is you don't need to provide the data and send it over by creating copies and copies and copies of it, because then you run into IP issues. So what we allow is to send, for example, software to the data, compute privacy preserving what you want from it, and only give out the results. So privacy preserving, IP preserving, and that's quite an enabler. Technically, what that means and why we're in the sandbox is, yeah, payments are relevant here, and I mean microtransactions and real-time payments and how to do them best. So we have various options to do that. You can use, for example, crypto tokens. We use electronic money regulated in Europe because it's accounting neutral, it's tax neutral, it is just as cash. So that streamlines the process very much. Second intersection is you need to deal with identity. I will only do business with counterparties I know and can identify and verify in real time. That creates trust, so that needs to be solved as well. And then we have additional services on the chain, for example, creating a catalog that is resilient against manipulation attacks from the outside. This is where DLT attributes like persistence, immutability, resistance against attacks come in very handy if you want to scale such an ecosystem that is not dependent on a central actor. And this is why we use smart contracts. Hard to tamper with, runs all the time, creates a resilient and scalable ecosystem where the incentives of all actors are aligned. And this is what we have been doing since 2021. We scaled this across Europe with a lot of companies, and we are proud to federate this even further.
I'm really happy to hear all of this. I can imagine that the regulators have learned a ton from both of your projects already. And I can also imagine that there were more projects included in the first cohort. So going to that, and before we actually look into the future and what the second cohort is going to bring to us, I note that there has been a report recently published by the European Commission about the European Blockchain Sandbox best practices from the first cohort. And I wonder what this report is all about. I would imagine that it summarizes some of the findings, for example, that the regulators have gained and some insights that were happening through the first cohort. So really, what are the best practices that you've observed in the first edition of the sandbox, and what did you consider to be the most interesting aspect of it? Maybe this is best place for Marjolein. And please, if you have a presentation, do let us know, because we have the ability to share that, to share the slides as well.
Yeah, and the best practices report was published by the end, or it was published in February, and it covers the first year of the project. So it's a 3-year project. 2023 was the first year of the project. The best practices report summarizes actually what has been done in setting up and operating the sandbox. Now, there were a few very important lessons learned and experiences worthwhile sharing with the wider community. The first actually very important development to report was actually the success of the whole application process and the selection process. We have 20 use cases in the first cohort, but we had almost 90 applications coming in. So there needed to be a serious selection because we only have 20 places. What was very good to see was that these applications came from everywhere in the European Union. So all EU regions were covered, and also it was across all industry sectors, covering a very broad range of different applications. So that was a very important, it was more or less a statement by the community, actually. This is a project that is of interest to the sector. It's European-wide, it is across sectors, and it is about blockchain DLT, because blockchain DLT is such a relevant technology and with such important use cases. Now, looking at the selection for the first cohort, I think a little later we will briefly discuss how that selection worked, but the selected use cases for the first cohort are also each of them very impressive. And that is because they were successful after the selection process. So they needed to show the maturity of the business case, the relevant regulatory and legal topics to discuss as part of the contribution to the wider EU policy objectives. So the Green Deal, the data economy, cybersecurity, human values. Looking at that first cohort of 20 use cases, all very impressive use cases with a widespread. So a number from the financial sector, of course, it's a very important sector, but not dominated by the financial sector. We also have a range of important use cases in the area of digital product passports, battery regulation. Very good to see that Fabio is here on behalf of Traent in the area of ESG. We also have a use case in CO2 emissions, sharing data about CO2. We have a use case focusing on cybersecurity. We have a DAO-focused use case. So it's really very broad and coming from all over the European Union. So that was the first statement. Now, then the second thing is it takes two to tango. You need, in a dialogue, the innovators on the one hand. You also need the regulators on a national and EU level to participate in the dialogue. So based on the selection of the first cohort, we needed to reach out to the regulators and authorities to invite them to join the dialogue and to invest time from their end to have an active role in these dialogues and to contribute to the exchange of thoughts with the use case owner, but also with other authorities, because it's a cross-border dialogue. Now, the second very encouraging conclusion of 2023 is that there was great interest from the regulators and the authorities as well to participate in these dialogues. So we currently have over 50 regulators and authorities on a national and an EU level who participate in the dialogues for these 20 use cases in the first cohort. And again, these regulators and authorities are coming from all over the European Union, and they cover a range of relevant regulatory areas. So that was the second very important finding, I think, also for the community. It's not that innovators are on their own. They want to have a dialogue with regulators, but the regulators are not there to have the dialogue with. So that was important, and it's the first time ever that such a project is being set up. So it was really testing whether this would work. And then, of course, we started having the dialogues, and we are still in the middle of those dialogues, but we have a number that have been completed already. What we see during those dialogues is that it is really a very worthwhile exercise to have this dialogue between the various groups. Of course, we need to focus these dialogues. We cannot have, if there are 6 relevant regulatory areas, you cannot have regulators from all 6 regulatory areas. You need to determine which regulatory area will be the focus of the dialogue, and then have relevant authorities in the dialogue. So we look at the home country of the use case owner. We consult with the use case owner where their preferred areas are. We reach out to them. We complement where we think, well, this would be a very good addition to the dialogue. And looking at how that is set up, I think also one of the best practices or lessons learned there is that it is not a one size fits all. So depending on the use case, we see use cases where it's very important that we have a broad group of regulators participating, giving their perspective and experience from different national laws, so from different jurisdictions. And we also have areas where, in particular, it's important to look at the crossroad, at the intersection of different regulatory areas. So we have regulators from 2 different regulatory areas that participate. Well, and by nature, that is not so efficient if you have then a very broad group of regulators around the table, because you need to have a more in-depth discussion on exactly that intersection. And then we have use cases that focus on new areas of regulation, so still in development. And there we also have a best practice is that it works well to have more national regulators, but also to have EU regulators in the as part of the dialogue, to have also the perspective from an EU wide level. So that is what we see in broad terms. There will be a next best practices report about the outcomes of the first round of dialogues, and that will be published before the summer. So that is still to come. But I would almost say I recommend having a look at the first best practices report. It's published on the website. It's a statement, I would say. It's a statement for the blockchain community.
Amazing to hear, and we'll make sure to circulate those links as well. It's probably going to be published as a comment to this LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much for these insights. It sounds quite incredible, and I definitely want to hear from Fabio and Kai what your experience looked like, whether you thought or experienced enough support from the regulators. One thing that crossed my mind is that quite often from the community, whenever we kind of bring the regulators into the room, what we hear is that they don't have the same language, and it's not really about whether we speak English or not, but it's almost as if you would need to have a translator in the room to really explain the technical terms sometimes. So I wonder whether you experienced those issues as well and how you resolved them. And then just to, kind of bring another topic that is also quite often raised by the community. Whenever we suggest you should speak to the regulators, like this is something that they are eager to hear and learn from you, and then everybody's almost like a bit afraid of speaking to the regulators, as in they don't want to put the spotlight on themselves. Who knows what's going to happen next? So I really wonder, what was your experience like? Whether you enjoyed the conversations, the dialogue, just how much time it took, whether these dialogues were quite often, as in did you have them 3 times per week, or was it once a month? How did it look like?
Okay, so the process for us was quite straightforward for the application, because it takes you just to write your use case, of course in detail, and then talk to people that are expert. So we didn't have any issue with the languages until now, but I want to say that my experience until now is only partial, because our meeting with the regulators will be in May and April. So I have just made part of the experience, but the process is very straightforward. And I think that if there is any company listening to us, and they may want to participate, I will highly suggest to do it. It doesn't requires like month, just the time needed to fill the application. Then of course there are some bureaucracy in order to make sure that you are a real company and a proper company, and this is, I think, of course needed. But from my experience, even is partial, everything was really straightforward.
Yeah, happy to add our experience. So first of all, what Fabio said, point. It's really straightforward, right? What is expected is to describe what you are doing in detail, why it's relevant. And basically everybody of us who is running a business here or creating a startup or doing this case for an institution does this each and every day. So that's in your DNA. So you describe that and you validate that. And the second point I'd like to mention, it's not too much work. Let it be a few hours, a few days you put together as a team. It's worth it. Absolutely. Because don't be afraid. If you are afraid, then you should even more go for the dialogue if there's any hesitation, because one way or the other, you will meet the regulator, and you better do it in this setting than after go live, after 2 years, in a much more unpleasant tone, right? You want to do your homework. So that's important, and don't be afraid. This is very a protected place to talk, to exchange, to align, and to put everything on the same level that you can understand each other. It's important validation. It's knowledge transfer. You will learn a lot from that. Depending on how much homework you did, there will be homework, but it has to be done anyway, right? And it gives you exposure. Don't forget about that, right? This is the way you want to go for Europe, and the sandbox certainly helps you with that. So very encouraging. What it gives you, so you will go in with expectations once this happens, and I'm absolutely pleasantly surprised on how well the regulators know their stuff, to put it in common terms. They do, and they know the technical details, and you won't be explaining this like, okay, you never heard something about blockchain. No, they know exactly what they are talking about, and that is also important for you, because it gives you new perspectives. You need these perspectives to look at areas maybe you haven't looked before, to prioritize what you want to do on your task list, because regulation is a broad topic and it's not simple to cover everything at once in this evolving field. So you will sharpen that experience. And last point, if you did your homework very thoroughly in your home country, that doesn't mean it's the same in the neighboring country, right? It's not that like regulation is harmonized in every regard across Europe. And this is why you truly need this European perspective here. you need to see where are the other countries and regulators standing? Where's the European regulation right now? Where will it be next? So I can be prepared for that, because you want to run a long-term sustainable business here that gets traction and is not just only working for a few months. So very recommended experience.
Perfect. I'm going to touch upon that homework that you just mentioned. And I kind of want to allow the opportunity to bring us towards what are the necessary steps that people need to take, what type of a homework they need to do in terms of the documentation that they need to gather. What are, for example, also the deadlines that they need to observe when applying to this process? Marjolein, maybe you can take us to that and talk a bit more, especially because there's a second cohort happening and people have about till 25th March.
Yeah, until the 25th of March. I think I have a few slides. Perhaps I can take 5 minutes to go through those, and perhaps we can have the next slide. Yeah, these are some of the advantages that we think are in participating in the sandbox. I think that that this was already explained quite well. There is, of course, perhaps I should mention that after the selection, you do not just jump into the dialogues with the regulators. There is the preparation with us as Bird and Bird. So we had several meetings with the use case owner, with every individual use case owner. We have meetings to go through the relevant regulatory topics, to discuss with them where the focus area should be, and also to prepare in depth the dialogue meeting. So what is on the agenda? What are the arguments? I think that is a benefit. It's in any event what we hear back from use case owners, that whole preparation and legal analysis that comes together with that is important. And then there's, of course, the fact that you receive the guidance, but also that it is a possibility to be heard, because not everything is crystal clear, of course, in regulation. And it's possible to actually explain in a confidential setting, confidential and secure setting, what you think the right interpretation is and how that would help the use cases, also in a broader context. So that is, I think, also an important element. I would say, I hope it's connections for life, because you have been together in the dialogue, so you know the people, and also we consider it as a success if contacts are established and actually pursued after the dialogue has been completed. It's a possibility to contribute to the best practices report, to build a network, to build a reputation. So that is, in short, the advantage. Perhaps next slide, I'll go over that very quickly, because these are the areas of regulation in the sandbox. So you see generic regulation, sector-specific regulation, and DLT-specific regulation, blockchain-specific regulation. And of course, we are not covering everything, but this is what we are discussing with the use case owners in preparation of the dialogues. Perhaps we go to the next slide, because that was actually your question, Anja, I think. The application process for the second cohort. Yes, the applications for the second cohort are open until the 25th of March of this year. So it's still almost a month to go. In preparing, we have on the website frequently asked questions. So questions that are being asked are answered, and they are made known and published on the website, so that everyone has the same level of understanding and information. It's a clear deadline, the 25th of March. If documents are submitted beyond the deadline, well, it's not possible, because the application form will not be longer available. But also in relation to annexes that you want to submit, it needs to be there on the 25th of March. So that's a clear deadline. And after the applications term is closed, the selection process will start, and we expect the outcome for the second cohort to be available in, let's say, 6 weeks after the 25th of March. Perhaps we go to the next slide. So important, who can apply? Companies, non-profit organizations, and also public entities can apply. There's room for all different categories. An important criterion is the applicant should be established in the EU or in the EEA. So the applicant should be in the European Union, also in existence for at least 6 months on the 25th of March of this year. But applicants can participate or apply with a consortium, and the consortium partners can also be outside the EU or the EEA. There's no need for the consortium to be in place for already 6 months, so the consortium can be formed only for the purpose of the application. There's also no requirement regarding legal status of the consortium. It's just that in the application process, there are names of consortium partners that are important and have a role in the use case. That's also what we have seen in the first cohort. We have use cases, selected use cases that are active actually on a global basis or beyond Europe as well, but they are all based in Europe. Perhaps the next slide. This is the application and the selection process. We work with eligibility criteria, award criteria, and tiebreakers. Everything is made public on the project website. So all the terms are there because we consider it very important that the whole process is transparent, objective, and non-discriminatory. In that respect, it's also important that we as Bird and Bird, we are not doing the selection. We are having conversations with use case owners. I'm very happy that we can have those conversations, and we do not want to have the bias that, oh, we spoke to this use case owner owner is submitting an application. Now there's a certain commitment or bias in the whole process. So the selection is done by independent blockchain experts, also part of the consortium. And the selection is overseen by a panel of independent blockchain academic professors from different European universities. So we have Roman Beck from the IT University in Denmark. We have Walter Blogger, professor in law at the University of Kassel, and Sula Luka, a professor in the University of Nicosia in Cyprus. So the selection is done independently. First of all, there are eligibility criteria, and to be eligible with the application, there's not many, but there are a few very important criteria. The first criterion is legal entity status. So natural persons cannot be the applicant. In existence for at least 6 months on the 25th of March. Another important eligibility criterion is a validated proof of concept. So at least TRL level 5. And there's of course more TRL levels, but the idea behind that is that it should not be use cases only mere theory behind the desk and what is the impact in real life. So it needs to have some level of maturity. Those are the eligibility criteria. Then looking at the award criteria, there are 3 categories. The first award criterion is maturity of the business case. So the more mature the business case, the higher the score will be on that criterion. The second criteria is novel regulatory and legal topics to discuss, not only topics relevant for one single use case in one single country, but topics that are of relevance for actually across more jurisdictions or across more sectors or a combination of the two. And the third criterion is contribution to the wider EU policy objectives like think I mentioned before, the Green Deal, data economy, cybersecurity, human values. We work with 4 different lots, each 5 spaces. The first lot is the micro enterprises. Second lot is the small enterprises. Third lot is the other enterprises. And the fourth lot is the public entities. The non-profit organizations are in principle in the lots for the private companies, unless they qualify as a public entity. And the criteria to qualify as a public entity are again published on the website, but they are actually in line with what is normally done for EU tenders and EU grants. So we have not been very innovative there in applying those criteria. And then we also have 3 tiebreakers in the event of equal scoring. We have the tiebreaker of regulator support. So if there is a regulator or authority that is prepared to join a use case in a dialogue, then there is a template letter on the website that can be signed by the authority or the regulator and submitted together with the application. So it needs to be submitted also ultimately on the 25th of March together with the application. There's not more in this letter than just the statement of the regulator or authority. Yes, I am, and I'm willing, I accept the invitation to join the dialogue with the use case owner and also with other authorities that we will then also invite to that dialogue. That tiebreaker comes into play if in the event of equal scoring on the shortlist. Another tiebreaker that could come into play, not necessarily, is geographical uniqueness. If we have a region that is underrepresented in the shortlist, then the geographical uniqueness tiebreaker might come into play to actually move that use case with the highest score in that region up to the shortlist. And the third, if all the award criteria and tiebreakers fail, then we might or the blockchain expert might apply the technical novelty tiebreaker, but this is only in the event that that is needed. And on that basis, the scoring is done, the shortlist is done, and the selection is determined for the second cohort. Perhaps one additional comment about the EPSI use cases, and there was a reference to EPSI a few times already. EPSI is, of course, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, but applications are open on all different blockchains. So not only on the EPSI infrastructure, but we currently have one EPSI use case in the first cohort. They qualify automatically. In the second cohort, we will probably also have one EPSI use case participating. I think that is it for this slide. Do we have another slide? I think you are going to share perhaps the slides after the webinar. So here is the website address. The QR code can be scanned, and then it takes you directly to the website.
I mean, if we have your permission, absolutely, we're going to share everything that we can.
Okay.
This has really been amazing. I wonder, one question quickly, just because there was a reference to EPSI, and just because we now brought it up as well. We heard that now there's ADIC also coming into existence, right? And there's been proposals for creating the European blockchain called European. So I wonder if you have any insights on how this is, how this may be relevant for the sandbox as well, if it's going to perhaps play a role in the future sandbox cohorts, or if you have any other information about it.
Well, actually it's a good question already to avoid confusion, I must say, because the ADIC is of course related to the EPSI, so it's relevant for the EPSI use cases, but the sandbox is about blockchain use cases in general, and that includes EPSI, and there are also use cases from other parties than the EBP that can have a use case on that runs on EPSI, but it's very important that the use cases that can participate can use every blockchain, and we have permissionless, permissioned, public, private. We have a whole combination, and that is actually very, very important for this sandbox, because we need also the different types of blockchain infrastructures, because the regulatory and legal topics and analysis might be different if you use a different blockchain. So
absolutely. Yeah, that's something that we have quite often argued. The more the merrier. We're currently in a phase of exploring what different blockchains kind of contribute to and what they bring. And the important part really is to kind of stay agnostic and to hopefully see the interoperability happening between those. I'll turn to Fabio and Kai just for a moment as well. What advice would you give to whomever wants to participate in the second cohort, now that we heard everything about the application process, and you said there is a homework and they should not be afraid, but is there anything that crosses your mind? What comes to your mind?
Me or Kai?
You can go ahead, Fabio.
I would say that considering the new regulation, there are a lot, but also the old regulation like GDPR, I will advise companies to look at this regulation not only as constraints, sometimes they are, but also as the opportunity. Because as a technologist, as a CTO, I know, Kai knows how much we can improve our software in terms of reliability, trustworthiness, privacy, transparency, and we should. So at this very moment, I'm talking about AI, it's crazy. So the implication of AI algorithm, they are huge. And we are in a moment where, particular moment where the technology is way, way beyond the regulation. So we need to have a look at the existing regulation like GDPR, have a look at the upcoming regulation like AI Act, and we need to, and also the new Green Deal, the product passport and everything, the ESG communication, and we need to, there is space to create a better product. So better product, European products that works for Europe, that make that set the standard higher standard than before. So I think this is an opportunity, and so I want just to say to the new companies, just to think about how the new regulation can be implemented, because often the regulation don't say anything about the implementation. You can have a regulation implemented in many different ways, okay? But often there is the principle, the rules, the law, but there is no implementation. So I think this is an opportunity.
That is so important. And yeah, thank you for raising it up. I think I saw Data Act also on one of the slides that touched upon, and Data Act touching upon the essential requirements for smart contracts for data sharing. Absolutely. Just like you mentioned, there is a real big question that we have raised in our open letter and in position papers on the topic of how this is going to then apply, or how it's going to be in practice. And it's a remaining open question that might be then later discussed in the regulatory technical standards or implementation technical standards, who knows? But it's really good to know that there exists a platform where we can also kind of ask the questions and be a bit more proactive. Very cool. Thank you so much. What about you, Kai?
Yeah, I'd like to applaud what Fabio said. Absolutely true. And I forgot one thing, Marjolein, you outlined this. You will be supported here, right? So Bird and Bird is really there to support you during the preparation phase if you're not comfortable or have not done this a lot of times. And this really helps. I think at least the companies that are new in business, right? You will be guided here. So don't be afraid. I just say it again because I think it's important. Then on the dimension Fabio touched on, I understand blockchain not only as a trust engine. This is also RegTech, regulatory technology. It enables so much compliance by automation, transparency. It gives you attributes you want to have as a regulator, as an enforcement agency, as a supervisory agency, right? Where else can you track everything, make it safe, make it reliable, it doesn't change on the go, is not falsified. So that's also a big opportunity for Europe and for regulators as well. And I think they perceive it as such. So they value the dialogue as you will do. And third point, often forgotten, a lot of innovation in this space, and looking, for example, at the Ethereum ecosystem and everything else, is coming from Europe. We are one of the largest hubs in the world when it comes to Web3 applications development and networks moving forward. Maybe you don't have this crazy VC investment schemes like you have elsewhere, but the innovation, the groundbreaking research and products are often coming from Europe and are being developed here. And this is what I like so much about this initiative. It appreciates that and gives it a framework to further grow, because it's important for Europe to be active here and in control and sovereign. Otherwise, this will just go elsewhere. So call to action to everybody. The upside here is very high. The risk is very limited, and you should go for it.
Thank you so much. I know that we have actually come to the time of 1 hour has passed before we even noticed. So I'm just going to ask Marjolein for maybe any final thoughts that you might have.
Well, no, thank you very much for organizing this. I can only echo the relevance of this project for innovation and the DLT community. It has been enriching to be participating in dialogues where on the basis of a real use case in a confidential setting, you can look at regulation, what it does, how it works, how it could be interpreted to make it work. And also, I think both Fabio and Kai have mentioned it, regulation is not only a threat, it is a facilitator here. And if I may just mention the fact that, for instance, the eIDAS 2 regulation has been adopted today in European Parliament. That is really a very important legal instrument. And I'm confident that we are going to look into that very closely as part of the second cohort. Like, as Fabio mentioned, the AI Act. There will be a separate regulatory sandbox, of course, about AI, but AI in connection with DLT, in connection with the Data Act, that is so novel, actually. And this is the opportunity, the sandbox, to look at how that works out in relation to a concrete use case. So the second cohort will not be more of the same, by no means. It will, we will, cover new grounds, and we will make that known through our best practices report. It's a good thing that's a 3-year project, I must say. It would be very regrettable if this would be the end of the story after one year. Thank you.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure to have you all. As previously said at the beginning of the LinkedIn Live, you are the experts, the OGs, and it's really insightful to have you on this call and to actually be able to gather all this information. I hope the audience is enjoying this and that you are going to get as much as we have gotten out of this conversation. Thank you again so much for taking the time and to share the knowledge. I think dissemination of this information is crucial, especially if we want to build bridges and if we want to have some sort of a sustainable Europe that really pushes forward for development, for the innovation in this space. Thank you also for the audience. If you stayed with us for the whole hour, if you wish to find out more about the regulatory updates or anything that we do at the EUCI, feel free to also navigate to our website or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter. We do regularly publish our position papers, share more information on regulation drafted or issued by the EU, and often explain how that may affect the blockchain environment or your business concepts. We hope that we're going to be able to circulate as much information gathered here as well, along with the QR codes, along with the contacts. So if you're going to have any questions, feel free to reach out to the speakers. There's also a newsletter that you can subscribe to and learn more about the very next LinkedIn Live session that we're going to host or co-organize in the future. But for now, thank you everyone for joining, and hopefully you're going to have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you.